Members, today is Monday, March 21st, and the time looks like to be about 1:01, 1:02. I call the meeting of Health, Finance, and Policy Committee to order. Thank you, everybody, and thank you, members. Representative Gilman, have you had a chance to look at the minutes?
I sure did.
Okay, thank you. Representative Gilman moves to approve the minutes from Wednesday, March 19th.
Mr. Chair.
Yeah, oh, I'm sorry. There's a hiccup? Representative Ryer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't show up as having been here.
You're not showed up?
I'm not on the members present list in the minutes.
Okay, well, yep, we'll get that changed for you because you were here.
Right.
So you kept the chair in place, you know what I'm saying, that day. Yep, but we'll get that incorporated. So with that change, Representative Gilman moves to approve the minutes.
Chair.
Whoopsie.
Representative Keeler's not on here.
Ooh. Okay. Anybody else that was not included? Okay, so we got that. So we will incorporate the change of Representative Keeler and Representative Ryer onto the minutes. So one last time, hopefully, Representative Gilman moves to approve the minutes from Wednesday, March 19th. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. The motion prevails and the minutes are approved. Thank you, members. So give you a lay of the land. We have quite a few bills here. First bill, House File 2371. We'll take about 15 minutes with that one. House File 2147, the Free the Hot Tub bill, will take also about 15 minutes. Nadeau's bill, probably about 5 minutes. And then Representative Nadeau, excuse me. Representative Bierman, Representative Bahner, about 15 minutes. And then my two bills are vehicle bills. We'll get to that. So those will be quick. So, and then we save the best for the last, Representative Bierman's bill. So with that, Representative Berg and Representative Robbins. The chair moves House File 2371 before the committee to be referred to the Public Safety, Finance, and Policy Committee. Who wants to introduce it? Go ahead, Representative Robbins, to the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. Thank you very much for hearing this bill. We are working under my version of the bill, which is HF 2371, but Representative Berg has HF 1584. They're very similar, so we appreciate you hearing from both of us co-presenting today. Members, this is a bill I've been carrying since my freshman term, and this is the first time it's had a hearing. And so I am very grateful to the committee for hearing the bill. It's a very simple bill. It would require that patients give consent before undergoing anesthetized procedures under which they could have a pelvic or prostate exam performed on them by students who are learning how to be physicians. And this is, I think, a very common sense bill. When I first learned that this was even an issue, I was stunned. This issue actually came to my attention by a friend of mine in another state who went through cancer treatment. And in her cancer treatment support group, this was the hot topic back in 2019. That's how long this has been an issue, and predating that. And so I drafted a bill, worked with some other advocates, and generally was told this doesn't happen, don't worry about it. Maybe people were trained like that in the old days. We don't do that anymore, which may be all great. But if that's true, then let's just put it in law, best practices. When I first worked on this, members, there were 8 states that had passed these sensitive exam laws. Now there have been 25. This is commonplace around the country now that states are protecting patients, and it's very common sense. If you're awake and there's a student present, they ask for your consent for the student to be in the room, to observe the exam, let alone perform the exam. So if you are unconscious, whether because of an accident or because, in most cases, a medical procedure, you should have to be requested to give permission in that case as well. So it's a simple bill. I think it has broad bipartisan support, as you'll see before us. And I do want to point out that Chair Liebling reached out to us over the weekend with some technical changes that she would like to see, and we weren't able to get that processed in time for this hearing, but we have committed to Chair Liebling that we will work with her and work on that for the next stop. So thank you for bringing those concerns forward. So could I invite
Representative Berg, did you
Berg?
want to go ahead, please, Representative Berg?
Thank you so much. Representative Robbins gave a great overview of the bill. I also carried legislation like this last biennium and did not get a hearing on it. So what I just want to say is that the right to give consent for what does or does not happen to our bodies is each and every one of us birthright. And so this bill, in the context that we're discussing, goes a long way to protect that sacred right. And I really appreciate all the work you've done for longer than I've been here to shed light on this issue and to make progress. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, representatives. We are now going to testifier, and we have one on Zoom right now that signed up. Molly
Yes.
Montague or Montague, thank you.
Montague. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, thank you. Go ahead. We would ask to keep it to about 3 minutes, please.
Understood. Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. I am Molly Montague. I am the Director of State Legislative Affairs with the Rape, Abuse, and Incest National Network, better known as RAIN. We are the nation's largest anti-sexual violence organization, and we run the National Sexual Assault Hotline. And I'm here today to urge you to support HF 2371, which addresses an issue brought to our attention at RAIN through folks calling the National Sexual Assault Hotline. Let's say that you go to a hospital for a shoulder surgery. And while you're under anesthesia for that procedure, students are brought in to practice a rectal, prostate, or gynecological exam on you. You'd probably expect to know that they're going to do that. However, someone could conduct a practice, non-medically necessary pelvic exam while you are under for your shoulder surgery, and you wouldn't necessarily know it. While likely uncommon, these practice exams, unrelated to the procedure that the patient went in for, do happen without the explicit permission of the patient. That is because in Minnesota, there is no law for the students or physicians to lean on if asked to conduct these educational exams without a patient's consent. Most physicians and students want to build a relationship of communication, trust, and consent with their patients. Requiring patients to give explicit, informed consent prior to these educational exams protects future medical professionals and patients. Especially for survivors of sexual assault, waking up from a procedure to find they have been violated elsewhere in their body is extremely re-traumatizing and causes some to avoid future medical care. 26 states have a law requiring explicit informed consent, including Ohio, which passed a similar law last year, Missouri, Maryland, and Pennsylvania. The American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists and the American Medical Association Code of Medical Ethics support informed consent practices for unconscious practice exams. This simple policy will give medical students and those who train them the support of the law when seeking consent before educational pelvic exams and ensure that medical interactions are transparent and safe for patients. As such, I urge this committee to support HF 2371, and I thank both the sponsors for working so diligently on this issue.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that. Open up to public. Anybody in the audience that would like to testify on the bill? Okay, seeing none, we have Representative Carroll. You have a question.
Thank you, Chair. This is to the author. I appreciate you bringing this bill, bringing this bill to us. I was wondering, why isn't the provider's professional obligation enough?
Representative Robbins? Okay.
So my understanding is that because it's in a clinical setting and people are participating in having the student present, that there's a sense that there's a general consent for student participation. And that, I think, was more the standard, but clearly times have evolved, and we think that providing informed consent is the best standard of care, and that has been upheld by the Association of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, the Minnesota, or the Medical Association. I have a list of the different professional associations that now support informed consent here. So it's the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, the American Medical Association, and the Federation of State Medical Boards all say that now this is a standard. And in 2024, the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services issued a memorandum suggesting that every state should adopt a policy like this, but it wasn't like force of law or something. So we just feel like this is best practice, and Minnesota's a leader in healthcare in all sorts of areas, and we certainly should be a leader in making informed consent for sensitive exams a standard practice.
Thank you. And Chair?
Follow up there, Representative Carroll?
Yes, quickly. So what I appreciate that response, but what I'm looking at is why isn't the professional obligation of the provider enough to cover this situation? And I'm in support of what you're doing, but I'm just kind of surprised that we can't rely on their professional obligation to not do this.
Right, I appreciate that, and perhaps it would cover, Mr. Chair, but the fact is it doesn't seem to have stopped the practice. So since the medical ethical obligation has not stop this from happening. As you'll see in the study, I put in a study in your packets, members, from, I believe it's 2022 or 2023. This isn't something from like the 60s or the 70s. This is ongoing concern. And a lot of times the concern is expressed by medical students. I have to tell you, 2 years ago, I wasn't going to reintroduce this bill because I tried so many times and I was just getting nowhere. And medical students are the ones who reached out to me and asked me to reintroduce the bill because they are put in an uncomfortable position where they are asked to do something by a supervisor that they don't feel comfortable doing because they know consent wasn't granted by the patient. And so I'm hearing that from patients, but I'm also hearing it from medical students. And so whatever the broad ethical obligation is in the oath certainly hasn't covered this topic sufficiently, so that's why we're bringing the bill.
Okay.
One clarification.
Representative Carroll.
Quickly. So you say medical students, do you mean residents or do you mean those who haven't graduated from med school yet?
Representative Robbins.
You know, I would have to go back and look through my emails. My understanding is I think they were mostly residents, but I mean, it was a couple years ago, so I don't have that top of mind of what level of student they were.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, Representative Hewitt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Representative Berg and Robbins, for carrying this bill. This is a really important bill, I believe. I'm just curious, does this go far enough? I'm real concerned that we're not, to get that informed consent, we're not explaining the whole procedure of what's going to happen, what they plan to do. It draws back a memory of mine to the gymnastic team in the U.S. Olympics. How can we avoid that kind of situation when the patient really probably doesn't understand what's being done? Is the bill go there or can it go there? Thank you.
Representative Berger, Representative Robbins.
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Representative Hewitt. I mean, I think both through the Representative Carroll's question and your own, like, why do we have to talk about consent in this day and age? This bill specifically works within the context of medical students. The bill that I had that was similar was just consent in general from any patient that when you go in for hand surgery, you don't get a pelvic exam that you didn't consent to. And so I don't know that we have an actual answer of does this go far enough, because we are seeing situations that one wouldn't imagine we would have to even consider where this is happening. But I think by and large, if you go in and you have a conversation with your provider and saying, okay, I'm gonna have surgery on my hand, my expectation is that I am not gonna have anything else touched or worked on while I'm under anesthesia. And I don't think that, I mean, we certainly could say you have to explain what a pelvic exam is, for example, but I think just having it as part of the form that you have to fill out where I do consent to an exam for educational purposes or I don't. And I like the fact that Representative Robbins' bill also includes prostate exams, because I think a lot of times it's easy for us to think about a pelvic exam, but I like the scope of your bill, including those protections for everyone.
Okay, Representative Liebling.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for bringing this. I am totally with you on the underlying issue, but there's a huge ick factor to this that is just undeniable, especially for women, but probably for everyone, really. But because this bill, and this is where I thought Representative Carroll was going to go, this actually imposes a criminal penalty. And when you're doing that, and when you're going to put structures around medical practice, especially when there's a criminal penalty, you have to be extraordinarily careful about how you word this so that you don't end up infringing on appropriate medical care. So I did make some, and thank you for mentioning it, Representative Robbins, I sent you some very specific suggestions for amendment, and I really hope that you'll take those to heart, because as the bill is written right now, and I know this is probably not the intent, but as this bill is written, a patient could not consent, would not be allowed to consent to an educational exam while under anesthesia. If you just look at the first clause here, sub 2, the first exception says that you have to have the written consent, and the exam has to be necessary for preventive, diagnostic, or treatment purposes. So I think what we're talking about here, and we have to be very careful, I think what we're all trying to prevent is exams that are not for clinical purposes, that are done without consent, right? Not for clinical purposes. And that is really not how this is drafted. So we have to be very careful. So with the hand surgery example that Representative Berg just brought up, say you're having hand surgery and suddenly the surgeon notices that you have vaginal bleeding. You want that surgeon to be able to do whatever they think they need to do to deal with your vaginal bleeding, notwithstanding that you didn't give consent for that exam. So that would be an example of a clinically appropriate exam. It wouldn't necessarily be necessary, because the word necessary is carrying too much weight here. Who knows if it's necessary until afterwards, right? You don't know. So you want to give doctors the ability to do what they need, what they think they need to do for the patient in the situations they find themselves, whether or not there's been written consent to that specific thing. So this just gives you a flavor of why I think this is a really, as it's written, it's very problematic. I completely get, I think, where you're trying to go to stop these educational exams and make it super clear that that's not okay without the patient's consent. We all get that. But anything that, you know, when you start making doctors worry that they're going to perhaps be charged criminally for something, my understanding is they stop doing that thing even if it would help the patient, because we don't want doctors to worry about somebody prosecuting them for doing what they think they need to do to help the patient. So that's where my concern is, and I really appreciate your attention to that. And I just think this bill really does need quite a bit of fine-tuning before it's really ready to become law. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to do the final question, and I'll let you address that in your closing. So, because we have a tight, so our final question will be from Representative Bahner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the authors. I will say, in general, I appreciate the intent of this bill, and I understand it. And having been the victim of sexual assault earlier in life, and only recently, decades later, being able to acknowledge that, I really appreciate the understanding behind this bill. The one thing I would say is that I have heard I have been exploring this very topic as part of a larger bill of sort of patients' Bill of Rights. And one of the things that I hear often too is that we are not doing a good job of informed consent, even when a patient is not under anesthesia. Where someone goes in for a regular gynecological exam, for example, and then they're being asked to do a very invasive, very painful biopsy of their intrauterine lining with no offer of pain management, with no offer or with no discussion about consent. And before you know it, a patient is doubled over in pain and unable to leave the exam room office without any guidance up front. And so while I appreciate this bill and I support the intent of this bill, I do hope that we will work to look at the language and maybe broaden the scope of this to include consent a little wider, and also at some places narrow the definitions in this bill so we don't catch doctors unaware as well. Thank you.
Okay, so you two get to please close on your bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. I do want to comment, it's funny, I'm 51 years old and I got a new gynecologist. And for the first time, even having 2 kids, all the things, all the years, for the first time, every step of the way she said, may I, and then fill in the blank for what, and I was like, well, lady, that's why I'm here, right? But like, that was the very first time that I experienced somebody that said, may I do this every step of the way. And so thank you for your line of questioning and for sharing your story behind it. And so I am open to the things that Chair Liebling and others have brought up in terms of refining language to really get to the goal of this, which is protecting people who can't protect themselves in the moment. So I am committed to that and to working with Chair Robbins.
Chair Robbins.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to all the questioners. And to just quickly address the concerns that Chair Liebling raised, I would point out that in sub 3, when the person is already unconscious or incapable, then if there's the need for a sensitive exam, it's necessary for diagnostic or treatment purposes, it is allowed. And in an earlier version, we had medically necessary. So I do plan to come up with the language that would address Chair Liebling's concern, because if someone is either brought in unconscious and they can't consent prior to a procedure, or if during a procedure something happens where it's medically necessary, of course, we want to provide doctors that flexibility. But I do think, I mean, it is a criminal charge, but it's a gross misdemeanor. It's the very lowest level, and I think we could maybe look at penalties when we're at the Judiciary Committee, but I would suggest that that's kind of what's been standard in the other states that have adopted this informed consent law, and so I think it hasn't caused a lot of concern in those states where, and to my knowledge, it's not been used widely, but I can try and get that data before we go into Judiciary Committee. So members, I appreciate your attention to this issue. After, I think this is my year 6 working on this, I'm optimistic that we are going to join the other states that have taken this approach. Thank you, members.
Okay, members, thank you. The chair renews his motion that House File 2371 be re-referred to public safety. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. The motion prevails and House File 2371 is re-referred to the public safety. Okay, we have House File 2147, Representative Schultz and Representative Bierman. Come on down. The chair moves House File 2147 before the committee, and before we also have to move that there's an A1 author amendment, correct?
That's right, Mr. Chair.
So to get this bill in the shape that the authors want, I would, all those in favor of supporting the A1 amendment, say aye. 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 Those opposed say nay. The motion prevails, and now we have the bill in the order that the authors want. It is the chair's intent to lay this bill over for possible inclusion between co-chair me and co-chair Bierman. So with that, Representative Schultz and Representative Greenman. Whoever wants to go first. And our goal is to keep this presentation to 15 minutes with everything, okay? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Appreciate having the chance to have House File 2147 in front of you right now as we seek to free the hot tubs and have a lot more fun here in Minnesota. I think that this bill is before us not because of any one specific interest that has created the regulatory framework that we have today, but what is currently in rule from the Department of Health has precluded short-term rentals across our state from being able to have a streamlined certain framework for whether or not they can have a hot tub on the premise of their short-term rental. And in the cases of several instances of my own constituents in central Minnesota, as well as a host of other counties across this state, short-term rental owners and operators have had a hard time even becoming licensed by their local health departments because of the rules that are in place, which House File 2147 seeks to address and provide the regulatory framework and certainty so that short-term rental owners and operators can have hot tubs on site for the benefit of all consumers, be they Minnesotans or people who choose to enjoy the great outdoors and all that our state has to offer. So that's my opening testimony.
Representative Greenman, what would you like to add? Looks like you have something about freeing the hot tubs.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I will also be brief and I think close. But when Representative Schultz and I started working on this bill, one of the things about the statute that stood out at me is there is actually treating a single occupancy hot tub the same way as a public pool that may have hundreds of people a day just doesn't make sense from a regulatory perspective. And also currently in statute, there is an exclusion for hot tubs on rental houseboats, which is a hot tub pool intended for seated recreational use, including a hot tub or whirlpool that is located on a houseboat that is rented to the public, is excluded from this public pools exclusion. This bill actually has more protections than that current exclusion, but it seems like the right comparison. And so I think that this is a good opportunity to right-size the regulation with the use and the risk.
Okay, thank you, Representative Greenman. We have three testifiers. First on deck is David Liddell. Then we have Ms. Kunis, and then on Zoom we have Ms. Frenrickson. So in that order, and we would ask that you would keep your testimonial down to 2.5 minutes, please. Introduce yourself and proceed, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee members. My name is David Liddell. I'm the president of the Minnesota Short-Term Rental Association. And I also spent the last 3 years as the managing director for Woodswater Vacation Homes in Nisswa. We manage short-term rentals. Currently, in Minnesota, hot tubs at short-term rentals are classified as public pools, as we've heard. And as such, they need to comply with all public pool standards. Per the Minnesota Department of Health, it's essentially impossible for an above-ground residential hot tub to comply with current public pool standards. It's just not feasible. The standard is also being enforced inconsistently across the state. For example, in Cass County, we had 3 clients who were contacted by MDH and asked to either drain or lock out their hot tubs from guest use because they posed an imminent public health risk. I think we were given seven days to comply. Across the state, there's thousands of current short-term rentals that are safely operating hot tubs for guest use, and then across the country, tens of thousands. I bet many in this room have used a short-term rental, an Airbnb or Vrbo, and enjoyed a hot tub. I know I have. Furthermore, many short-term rental owners and operators hire professional companies to regularly do water service, and these water services include changing filters, testing chemicals, draining and refilling the hot tubs when necessary. And I would say that furthermore, that the hot tubs of today, which are equipped with UV and ozone technology, are much safer than the hot tubs of yesterday. There's online platforms like Airbnb, Vrbo, Booking.com. These platforms all have algorithms that heavily weigh guest reviews, meaning that short-term rental owner and operators are pretty strongly incentivized to ensure their guests have a 5-star stay. Ensuring a clean and chemically balanced hot tub is a common pre-guest arrival practice. No host wants a guest to show up to a dirty hot tub. The Minnesota Short-Term Rental Association, we strongly support this bipartisan effort, and we encourage and urge you to support it as well. And we believe that it places some reasonable requirements to ensure that hot tubs in Minnesota short-term rentals are regularly tested prior to guest arrival. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We have next Ms. Kunis from the Minnesota Department of Health, and then Zoom is Ms. Fredrickson. Go ahead, state your name and proceed 2.5 minutes, please.
Good afternoon. I'm Myra Kunis, the Assistant Commissioner at the
you
Minnesota
pull-
Department of Health. Is that better?
Yeah,
Okay,
much
thanks.
better. Thank you, ma'am.
Excellent. I'll just be very brief. At the Minnesota Department of Health, we do enjoy fun. And we also want to make sure that people are doing that in a safe and appropriate manner. The safety risks with unlicensed pools and hot tubs includes drowning, waterborne illnesses, and chemical hazards. This bill, as written, we do have concerns about risk of entrapment because there are not safety features required in residential hot tubs. We also have, there is serious risk of waterborne illnesses, including Legionnaire's disease, Pontiac fever, as well as hot tub rash, chemical burns, and cryptosporidium. Without unregulated hot tubs in use, the public has an unknown exposure to these waterborne illnesses and serious chemical risks. So we do have concerns. We would like to work with the authors on making adjustments, and I'm very open to that. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Now we turn to Zoom and Ms. Mindy Fredrickson.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. My name is Mindy Fredrickson. My husband and I own Gunflint Lodge and Outfitters in Cook County. And it's a historic wilderness resort on the Gunflint Trail. And we do support this House File 2147. We would welcome the opportunity to provide our guests with a good hot tub experience. We do have a few cabins that have commercial hot tubs, and we find that the cabins that offer this experience are very popular. They're very profitable as compared to some of the other cabins that don't offer that amenity. We know that our guests are looking for a high quality outdoor experience, and access to private hot tubs enhances their stays by providing relaxation and wellness benefits, particularly after they're engaging in outdoor activities like hiking or skiing. The law, the way it's currently written with the restrictions on allowing private hot tubs, really, it works to a competitive disadvantage to Minnesota resorts and I guess as spoken about other rental properties. So some of those properties, I think, are going ahead and using residential hot tubs, perhaps in an unregulated way because of the restrictions the state has placed on them. Others simply aren't able to offer that benefit to our guests. And it also places an undue burden or a competitive disadvantage to Minnesotans because people who are looking for vacations, vacation rentals can go other places in the country where they can find those same amenities readily available. Like I said, we do have some hot tubs that are commercial and that we are able to offer. Those are inspected by the health department regularly, annually. They're inspected by our own staff daily. We have a certified pool operator on staff. We follow all of the commercial requirements of a public pool. And we've never had any problem with those. As was mentioned, this regulation or this bill as it's written kind of mirrors the houseboat exception, which has been in effect for, probably 20 years within Minnesota. And I'm not aware of any injury or illness that's occurred on a houseboat in a private residential pool on a houseboat.
And we're going to need you to wrap this up, please.
Okay. Well, thank you for listening to me. I recommend that you guys would accept the bill, and of course we're open to any kinds of safeguards that the health department would recommend. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you. Turn this over to, is there anybody in the public that would like to testify on this bill? Okay, seeing none, we are turning it over to members' discussion. We have Representative Carroll back on deck, number one position again.
Thank you,
Representative Carroll.
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate the pole position. So I appreciate this bill. I thought we had an agreement that you were going to appear in committee with a certain level of attire. I won't go into that in front of everyone.
No, please not.
Look at them. So anyway.
Bipartisan agreement. Power sharing.
That's right, in the spirit. So I appreciate your, your goal to provide safety and a good experience and all that. So I'm wondering about lines 215 through 17, where you say notice, then you exempt the operator from certain health and safety standards. Can you explain that? What's the purpose of that?
Representative Schultz.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Representative Carroll. Lines 2.5 through 2.7 relate to specifically the notice that is given to people who choose to rent or use a short-term rental facility. And so this specifically gives them the guidance to say, hey, this does not meet every rule or law that is in place as it relates to preventing disease.
Follow-up, Representative Carroll?
No, I appreciate the explanation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We have Representative Purcell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was wondering if the Department of Health person could return up to the stand. I have a question. Thank you. So I am a co-author on this bipartisan bill, but I am wondering, we're removing some language about hot tubs on houseboats and replacing that with a little more general hot tub language, or more hot tubs that qualify. So I'm wondering what you can tell us about how you have seen this legislation apply to houseboats previously.
Can I
Oh, okay, Representative Greenman, go ahead.
let me just clarify, because there is, thank you, Mr. Chair, there is a little bit of a drafting, which is this is not intended to change the houseboat. Because of the way that it was drafted, we're sort of amending the statute to be more general for all short-term rental,
Right.
and then reinserting the hot tub on houseboats language. So this, just for clarification, this bill is not intended to change the hot tub on houseboats. It's adding it.
Great.
So
Ms. Kunis, did you have any comment?
I did not have any additional comment. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, very good.
Can I ask a
Follow, Ms. Representative Purcell, follow.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So can you give us examples of how the health department has or has not interacted with hot tubs on houseboats prior to this? Because if that's sort of the statute that we're using to then include more, maybe there hasn't been an issue since 1985. Maybe there are more relevant incidents that we should know about. So I guess I'm wondering, to the prior bill language or the statute language, what has been the interaction of the Department of Health? It sounds like it's been kind of dependent on county, perhaps, but I would love to get your take on that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Ms. Kunis.
Yes, thank you, Chair, Madam. So there aren't very many hot tubs on houseboats. I know. But we are treating them all the same. So what I would say is it would expand it. The short-term rental has changed significantly in Minnesota, so.
Okay, well, our final question will come from Representative Liebling. You have the floor. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for this. So my question is about, and I see in the current language with the current, I guess, the rentals on the houseboats, you've got this use at your own risk notice. And I'm wondering, do the folks who have these hot tubs carry insurance? And do they have to? They just do it if they feel like it? Is their insurance going to cover, if this bill passes and somebody gets, Legionella disease and something, or gets entrapped or something, is the owner's insurance going to cover that?
Representative Schultz.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And if Mr. Liedl wanted to answer that question in greater detail, he certainly could. But I believe that each individual small business that owns and operates is, to a certain extent, licensed for different reasons and also insured.
Sure, go ahead, please. State your name and answer the question. Thank you.
David Liedl, thank you for the question. My current understanding is that there isn't necessarily like a state law that requires a short-term rental to have a certain threshold of insurance. However, like Representative Schultz said, most of these individuals are operating like an LLC, so they're going to have business insurance with maybe $1 million, $2 million of liability. Depending on the municipality that they're in, for example, Cross Lake, those municipalities that have rules regarding short-term rentals will also require certain levels of insurance as part of receiving a license from the city.
Okay, follow-up? Okay, well, thank you. The chair was happy that you did not come in any other different attire. I just want to state that for the record after Representative Carroll. So anyways, thank you. Thank you, everybody. The chair lays over House File 2147 for possible inclusion in an omnibus bill. Thank you, Representative Greenman and Representative Schultz. Okay, we are now to House File 2557, Representative Nadeau. This one we'll spend about 5 minutes on. The chair moves House File 2557 before the committee with an A2 author amendment to get the bill in shape that the author wants. All those in favor say aye. 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 All those opposed say nay. Okay, so yes, the motion prevails and the amendment is adopted. We now have the bill as the author wants it, and it is that's House File 2557 before the committee with the chair's intent to lay the bill over for possible inclusion. Representative Nadeau, to your bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, members. This is a very simple bill. And what it does is currently the hospital surcharge, that's 1.56%, is currently going into the general fund, straight to the general fund. And so what this bill does is this basically, it takes those dollars and puts them into the healthcare access fund. You'll notice in the underlying bill, medical assistance account is stricken. That is a meaningless, non-dedicated account in the general fund, so we're not doing anything there. And the other thing that's so awesome about this bill is I worked with House Fiscal, and we made it budget neutral. So we are increasing the healthcare access fund share of medical assistance, the medical assistance appropriation, and reducing the general fund forecasted expenditures by the same amount. I feel strongly that dollars that are, it doesn't matter if it's taxes and surcharges and fees, I believe that when those amounts are collected from our healthcare providers and systems, we should make sure that we're doing everything in our power that those dollars are going into providing services for the people that we serve, and ultimately, hopefully leveraging every dollar that we collect in healthcare taxes, surcharges, and fees. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
We do not have any testifiers that signed up ahead of time. Is there anybody in the public that would like to testify on this bill? Seeing none, members' discussion. Representative Liebling.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Representative Nadeau, aren't there some things, there are a lot of weird things in law around the healthcare access fund. I mean, a lot of, for lack of a better term, a lot of games have been played with these funds back and forth over the years. And isn't there something in law that says that when the level gets to a certain point, that the tax is reduced automatically? So wouldn't your bill have the effect of reducing the tax?
Representative Nadeau.
And thank you, Mr. Chair, and we did look at that, and I would really like Joe Harney to answer that in specificity.
Mr. Harney, go ahead, please.
Chair Backer, members of the committee, Representative Liebling is correct. There is a contingent reduction that the Commissioner of Management Budget looks at, but that's subject to only the provider tax. The surcharge is not subject to the levels of revenues and expenditures that contingent look in the reduction assesses. So all this to say is that the surcharge is not subject to it, but the provider tax is subject to that reduction.
Representative Liebling.
Right, well, thank you, Mr. Harney. So, but doesn't that mean, though, if we start putting money, just moving it into the Healthcare Access Fund, that at some point that the provider tax is going to automatically start to reduce because there's X amount of funding, I don't know what it is, in that fund?
Mr. Harvey.
Chair Backer, Representative Liebling, in the bill before the amendment, yes. But the amendment actually increases the base appropriation for medical assistance. So the money gets deposited in a healthcare access fund and is thus immediately spent. So it's a one-to-one there. There's no increase in revenues without a commensurate increase in expenditures.
Okay, great. Good. Thank you. Okay, any other members' discussion? Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Vice Chair Nadeau. The chair lays over House File 2557 for possible inclusion in our omnibus bills. Thank you. House File 1165, Representative Bahner. Bahner, you are up. Representative Bahner, would you like to move House File 1165 to higher education?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I would like to move House File 1165 before the committee and recommend that it be referred to the Higher Education Committee.
Thank you so much. Our goal is to spend about 15 minutes on this, and to that, please introduce the bill.
Well, Mr. Chair, I'm hoping we can do it even faster, but we'll see how that goes. First of all, Chair and members, I'd like to introduce you today to one of the state's best-kept secrets, the Minnesota Higher Education Facilities Authority, or MHEFA. It has been in existence for over 50 years. And their mission is to shepherd and fund worthy projects to ensure their success using their tax-exempt bonding authority for capital projects. This work expands options for non-government or nonprofit entities in the areas of higher education and hopefully soon to be healthcare. These fees are lower than allowed by IRS and represent a solid value to fund worthy projects that have a broader public benefit. They've have a proven track record of success born out of decades of experience. This state agency takes its authority from the state, but is fully self-funded, meaning no cost for administration and staffing are paid for out of fees for administration and staffing fees are paid for out of fees generated by the work that they do. So I want to repeat, there is no cost to the state budget. This agency is overseen by a board appointed by the governor with the consent of the Senate. They run a tight ship with only 2 paid staff and billions of dollars worth of successfully executed projects. My apologies. While this agency has toiled away doing great work over the years, in more recent years, they have been approached to use their vast experience for healthcare and senior living projects. But these projects have been out of their scope. They realized that there was an ever-growing need for projects that like their original scope, go beyond basic capital and meet the greater public good, which brings us here today. Many states do allow a similar authority for both education and healthcare. MHEFA would like to seek authority to do the same. So here's what the bill does in a nutshell. First, it changes the name of the organization from the Minnesota Higher Education Facilities Authority to the Minnesota Health and Education Facilities Authority to reflect the newly expanded authority that they seek. Second, it expands the scope of the agency to include the ability to finance healthcare and senior living facilities, and adds one board member specializing in healthcare. I should say a non-voting member. Third, it increases the amount of financing authority allowed by the agency to cover the new dual mission. It clearly defines that $2.2 billion of their funding will be used for their original mission for higher education, and $2.75 billion to address the increased demand for additional scope on nonprofit healthcare and senior living. In essence, MHEFA is here today to ask the legislature for permission to apply their extensive skills and low-cost capital bonding authority to meet an increasing need within our communities. The bill has bipartisan support in both chambers. It has passed through the Senate in 2 previous sessions, but both times we ran out of time to hear it here in this committee to match up with the Senate. And so where it had been laid over for inclusion in the past. We're hoping to rectify that today. So members, I ask for your support to finally get this bill on its way. You'll find in your packets a 1-pager explaining all about the agency itself, as well as the benefit summaries, and I think there's even a letter of support. Again, there is also a fiscal note showing that there is no cost to the state. And with that, I have with me my testifier, Barry Fick from MHEFA.
Thank you. State your name, Mr. Fick, and about 2.5 minutes. Proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to meet with you this afternoon. As Representative Bahner noted, my name is Barry Fick. I'm the Executive Director of the Minnesota Higher Education Facilities Authority. I've been in that position for about 8.5 years. And in that time, as Representative Bahner noted, we have received inquiries about the ability to extend our expertise to helping with healthcare financing, not-for-profit healthcare financings. There are currently 14 other states in the country that have a similar opportunity or a similar mission where they do both healthcare and higher education. In addition to that, there are 5 states that have a separate healthcare and a separate higher ed authority. We'd like to join that group of the 14 that does both of those. We believe that we can leverage our expertise and skill set so that we can both have a strong vetting process to ensure the fiscal stability of the projects we finance and hopefully help keep them on track as they go forward. Representative Bahner did a very eloquent job of explaining what we do, and I'd be happy to respond and stand for questions.
Thank you so much. Anybody in the public that would like to speak on this bill? Seeing none. Members, discussion, questions? Representative Liebling.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and a couple things. One is that in the section defining healthcare facility, I took a quick look through there. I didn't see anything about dental facilities, and I want to make sure that that is included. It looks like it's kind of included in the penumbra of this, but I just wanted to put on the record whether dental facilities are included.
Mr. Fink?
Yes, Mr. Chair, Representative, dental facilities would be included in there under the rubric of general health care. It's broad enough that we believe that, we know that will work.
Okay.
Mr. Chair.
Did you have, oh, I'm sorry, Representative Liebling.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And then one other quick thing. It says in a couple places here that this applies to facilities within states that are geographically contiguous to Minnesota. And I wonder if you could just spend a moment kind of explaining that piece of it.
Certainly.
Go ahead.
Mr. Chair, Representative Liebler. That is in there so that if there is a Minnesota-based entity, which is the only things we can finance, but if they are going to do sort of an ancillary feeder clinic in a state directly adjacent to Minnesota, we would have the opportunity, if they chose, to use us to finance that. That is very similar to what, for example, South Dakota has already in their legislation, that a South Dakota entity can finance a project within Minnesota if it's a South Dakota-based organization. So we're simply doing the exact same thing to assist the Minnesota entity with their success.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We have Representative Ryer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't need to ask my question as Representative Liebling took care of it. Thank you.
Okay, good. Representative Nadeau.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And can you give me, Representative Bahner, can you give me some examples of how this funding has been used in the past that I would know about?
Representative Bahner.
I might actually send that to my testifier as the expert who actually does the work every day.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Could you expand a little bit I can give you plenty of examples for the higher ed. Since we haven't done healthcare financing, but for the higher ed side of it, we will do academic facilities for the private schools in the state of Minnesota. We have done auditorium facilities for those schools. We have done dormitories. We have done stadiums, small stadiums for them, and wherever they needed to have capital facilities in order to provide a better cost structure for the facility and for the university or the college, that's where we excel in our providing assistance.
Representative Nadeau, follow-up?
Yeah. And thank you. So would Purpose Center for the Arts, would they be eligible to use this funding to increase, classroom sizes, for example? And now, would a nonprofit organization that provides, let's just say, employment services to people with disabilities who want to increase the capacity of their facility, would they also be eligible for funding under this current proposal?
Go ahead.
Mr. Chair, Representative, under the terms of our existing authority, they would most likely not be able to be financed. They would not be in either higher education or healthcare.
Follow-up? Okay, we are turning to Representative Gilman.
Thank you so much, Chair. So the question I have really quick too is just how will you determine which projects get done? Like how do you do that now? But how would you look at judging, again, greater Minnesota versus the metro? How would you figure out how you would prioritize projects to be done?
Go ahead, Mr. Fick.
Mr. Chair, Representative, we currently have a very extensive vetting process in place where an application needs to be filled out, which provides a significant amount of financial information, both about the proposed borrower as well as the project and the need for the project from their perspective. We have, at this point, a strong capacity, so we generally go on a first-come, first-served basis, and we explore that project both at the financial level and at the mechanical level in terms of what the project is going to be about, who it will benefit, and then with the additional board member, we would have the healthcare expertise to enable us to fully make sure that we are financing a project that would be beneficial for the community and that would have the probability of long-term success.
Follow-up, Representative Gilman?
I think that answers. Thank
Okay.
you.
Any further discussion or questions? With not, Representative Bahner, to your close of your bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Like I said, this bill has made it all the way through the Senate multiple times, a good portion of the way through the House. We would love to be able to get this bill off the table and get it finally done. The other thing is that we really have seen a number of facilities looking to expand, and I don't believe we had the letters in time for today's hearing, but we did have letters of support from other clinics like the Hazelton Clinic and things like that, or facilities that might like to add, say, beds to a memory care unit, or they might like to expand their facility if they're a nonprofit healthcare organization. And typically, unfortunately, they just had to be turned away because they do not fit the scope. And there is an increased need, I think, across the state and in even greater Minnesota, which I appreciate Representative Gilman mentioning. And so this would provide the organization with the ability to do that work.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Representative Bahner renews her motion that House File 1165 be referred to the Committee of Higher Education, Finance, and Policy. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. The motion prevails and House File 1165 is re-referred to the Committee of Higher Education, Finance, and Policy.
Hit that thing a little harder.
Yes, thank you. House File 2482. Representative Bierman, would you like to move your bill with the intent to lay it over for possible inclusion in our omnibus bill?
Yes, please, Mr. Chair.
Representative Co-Chair, or we'll say Chair, let's just do Chair thing. Chair Bierman, please introduce your bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, members. House File 2482 is a healthcare administration policy bill. This bill makes technical edits to new language that was passed in the 2024 session related to prior authorizations. The modifications in this bill make conforming changes in statute to account for our public health care programs, medical assistance, and Minnesota Care. In Section 1, the underlying language in Section 62M.17 Subdivision 2 outlines requirements that occur during a plan year. But a plan year is not a concept for DHS fee-for-service healthcare programs. To address this issue, the bill adds language specific to fee-for-service providers under Chapter 256B, which is the medical assistance chapter, and 256L, which is the Minnesota Care chapter of law. Section 2 removes one reference in a list of statutes that outlines applicability of non-DHS chapters in Chapter 62M, which is typically applicable to commercial health plan utilization reviews, to DHS as it relates to utilization reviews. The reference removed eliminates the requirement that DHS would have to post on their website data for each commercial product. But because DHS does not offer commercial products, this should not apply. DHS managed care organizations would still be subject to this requirement. The plan, Mr. Chair, for this bill is to lay it over. This will provide us some time to address the desired reporting we as legislators wish to see and understand from DHS. And for questions, Mr. Chair, I have Ms. Christy Grom here from DHS to help answer them.
Ms. Grom, thank you. Ms. Grom, did you want to do a little testimony on this or a description before we turn it over to the members?
Mr. Chair, thank you. Christy Grom with the Department of Human Services. I think Chair Bierman did a good job in describing this bill. It's just 2 sections, so happy to stand for any questions.
Okay, very good. Is there anybody in the public that would like to speak for or against this bill? With seeing none, excuse me, members' discussion. Representative Nadeau is first on deck.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks you, Representative Bierman, for bringing this, I guess. I'm taking this as a personal affront, you know, striking 62M.18, which we worked very hard in the last session to put in here. So I've got a couple of questions to Ms. Grom. I have one question. Is the agency fee-for-service exempt from complying with any and all requirements of 62M?
Ms. Grom.
Mr. Chair, I would have to look at the full chapter and do an analysis to provide you a answer that I think is reasonably correct. I can say, Representative Nadeau, that this change wasn't intended to roll back progress on transparency for prior authorizations. It was really just, there was a piece of this that I think was incorrectly maybe drafted, and so we would love to work with you to fix that.
Representative Nadeau.
And thank you, Mr. Chair. And yes, I'll definitely work. I'll definitely work with you on that because I agree that you know, in this statute, it's not a health plan company. But if that were the case, we could have easily, we were in 256B, we could have easily put this in. So I'm a little hesitant. I feel like we're trying to get DHS out from having to report prior auths. And if I remember right, I mean, this was a $32 million fiscal note when we did this. And I'm all about transparency. I'm all about fairness. I want the plans to report their prior auth denials and when they fix those. And I think it's only fair that you know that DHS does as well. So as long as Representative Bierman is willing to work with me on this, I will stop filibustering and say thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Representative Bierman. Co-Chair Bierman.
Guaranteed I will work with you on this, Rep. Nadeau, to get it right before we send it on and move it out.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, other questions?
Thank you,
Wow.
Mr. Chair. Thank you, members.
Close, yes. I thought this was going to take a whole lot longer. This is why I was planning for more time on this bill. I was wrong, so thank you. Representative Bahner, I'm sorry, I'm wrong one. Representative Bierman, we'll get this right. Chair Bierman, you'll lay over House File 2482 is laid over for possible inclusion in our omnibus bill. Okay, I'm going to stay where I am for House File 2466 and House File 2465. So first of all, we're going to take up House File 2466. The chair moves House File 2466 be referred to the Committee of Taxes. When I was in Representative Hewitt's district this summer, this was the #1 thing that came up at your door. No, I'm just kidding. No, on the serious note, members, we are coming down to the wire, and as Chair Bierman and I know, there's still a lot of work to do in a short period of time. So it is always helpful to have what we call a vehicle bill in various places if we need them, because we do have to work with the other body. So this is a technical bill drafted by nonpartisan that changes shells to must and striking outdated dates to be used as a vehicle bill to be parked in the tax committee if needed. And I would appreciate your support. Any member discussion? Okay. The chair renews his motion that House File 2466 be referred to the Committee on Taxes. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay.
No.
Representative, this prevails, and House File 2466 is referred to the Committee on Taxes. Okay, we have a Lone Ranger over here on the other side, but anyways, on the serious note, the chair now moves House File 2466 be placed on the General Register. Again, talking just does the same thing. It gives Chair Bierman and I flexibility as we get down to the wire. So I would appreciate your support. Members, discussion. Okay, the chair renews his motion that House File 2465 be placed on the General Register. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. No. All right. The motion prevails and House File 2466 is placed on the General Register. Seeing no further business before the committee, our next hearing is Wednesday, March 26th. Chair Bierman will have the gavel, and the committee is adjourned. Thank you, members.